Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. We're back and on the eve of Atletico Madrid. As things stands at the moment, nothing's changed. Can you believe that in the Spurs sphere? Nothing's changed. I'm joined by my fabulous returning co-host in Billie T. Bill, lovely to be back alongside me. Firstly, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very good, mate. Obviously, just an absolutely crazy couple of weeks for us, but just a real honour to be here tonight on the show in particular.
Absolutely. And look, it's funny because we always joke, Bill, that we say we've been in such a crisis for so long, we've forgotten what it's like being out of a crisis. It's been just a crazy, chaotic time around Tottenham. So what it's nice to do on times like this is when we drive ourselves mad about Tottenham, it's nice to get an outside opinion on all things Tottenham. And it's a man that we're bringing onto the show, a returning journalist that is one of the most recognisable men in sports media, who's been writing for football for over 35 years. I don't want to age him at all. Look, a man that knows just a little bit about the beautiful game. And of course, he's also the co-host of the superb Football Boardroom Podcast alongside the ex-Liverpool Chelsea Villa executive Christian Purslow. You can see him on TalkSport as well. We're delighted to welcome to Last Word on Spurs, genuine football heritage, and Henry Winter. Henry, love to see you back alongside us. How are you?
Well, brilliant. I mean, thanks for having me on. I mean, I listened to you guys. I heard, Ricky, your 9-minute dissection of everything that was wrong at Tottenham Hotspur on Sky the other day. I think Bridgie was outside the ground, and it was an education for me, but also I hope the board watched that, not simply for what you said, which was just spot on. I'm not just trying to warm you up because you're in what looks like Ice Station Zebra there. You've got about 17 layers on, but because everything you spoke with such passion. And if you're in a board, one thing you don't want with your fan base is apathy. And that passion that you've got, that Billy's got, that Tottenham fans have for this great club of yours is absolutely vital. And clubs have to appreciate that. And if they lose passion, then that really is a slippery slope. So that passion with which you spoke, I would like to have seen that in some of your players, by the way. But I hope the club pick up on that, mate.
Listen, you're too kind, Henry. You are too kind. Thank you ever so much for your time. It's lovely to be back on the show. Listen, thanks to the thousands out there who've actually been in touch with me personally on the back of that interview. And listen, as I've always said, if I get the opportunity to go on to mainstream media, whether it's Sky, BBC, TalkSport, I'll always try and talk how I think things are going. And look, I always say that I don't speak for anybody. I'm sure I know, Bill, you said the same over at Change for Tottenham, and you personally, that you're not one for speaking for people. You know, I just reflect how I feel as a Tottenham fan. I'm sure, Bill, you want to come in on that point that, as you know, Bill, there's just such a disillusionment around Tottenham fans right now and just where the mood is at, Bill. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. And that word that Henry just used, I think, is a real worry, is apathy. And that's the danger zone, isn't it, for football fans? We don't want to feel that. And I was obviously there on Thursday, and when the red card went up, it almost felt like Spurs fans were sort of accepting, that this is our fate now. We're actually going to get relegated here. And it was, they really tried before that as well with the atmosphere. The fans were really getting behind the team. But it just kind of felt like when that red card went up and we considered those 3 goals, that now relegation is a very, very real threat. And it's terrifying, to be honest with you. I'll be honest, I can't get it out of my mind at the moment. It's almost consuming my every waking second, the thought that Tottenham might actually be relegated. And it is absolutely terrifying. And what's happening in front of our club is an absolute disgrace. And, it's great to have such an expert on to talk about it with tonight because, as we always joke, Rick, about the crisis, don't we? But it's been a year-long crisis, if not 2-year-long crisis. So, yeah, it's just been an absolute, Spurs fans have really been through the ringer this time.
It's funny you say that, Bill, just very quickly on that before we bring Henry in, because I was sitting there the other night, had a family day out on Saturday, came back in the evening, and was just looking to chill out. And then, I don't know what came over me. It kind of really did dawn on me even more so, just the kind of precarious position that we're in and just how on earth we're going to try and find our way out of this. And look, we've got some would say a welcome distraction, some would say an unhappy distraction in Atletico Madrid round the corner in the Champions League this week for our listeners on audio. But what it doesn't get away from the fact of just the task ahead of Tottenham in terms of trying to survive in the Premier League. And this show has been titled, for listeners on audio, How Do Spurs Survive? And we're getting Henry's take on what is made of just the last year or so around the club, because we brought Henry on actually just before the Thomas Frank appointment. And I think there was real genuine hope that things were going to start to turn in the better direction at Tottenham. But if anything, it's probably as more toxic now than it's ever been before. And Jason said, actually, and he was on with him before, Henry, he said it's unbelievable to think that in the last 12 months, we've seen Daniel Levy leave, we've won a trophy, and we're as angry now, if not more, than we've ever been. So before we bring Henry in, just to give everybody an update of where we are going into this fresh week, it is understood that Tottenham are considering their options for a second change of manager in a month after 3 defeats in Igor Tudor's first 3 matches in charge. We've also seen 3 different formations deployed by the Croatian. But as things stand, the club say Tudor will take the team for the Champions League game against Atletico Madrid on Tuesday. And Billy referenced their Thursday night. And quite interestingly, we understand that after the game on Thursday, what's been reported is that the players still in kit held an impromptu discussion in the changing room. And there was reportedly talk of facing up to the gravity of the situation and taking more personal responsibility for performances. I mean, the thing you worry about there is, why has that taken so long to come to the point now where they're getting to grips with where we are? And just on that point, Bill, if I bring you in and I go to Henry, this is just staggering when I read these statistics out. And for you guys out there, if you can, for us, like, hype, subscribe to the show as you always do, it's greatly appreciated. So Spurs, we failed to win in 11 successive league games for the first time since October 1975. And it's the first time we've suffered defeat in 5 successive Premier League matches since November 2004. We've conceded 2 or more goals in 9 consecutive league games for the first time in our history. And not since 1935 have Tottenham gone on a longer winless run in league football to begin a calendar year than their 11 matches in 2026 so far. It was 15 back then. But Bill, I mean, something needs changing it, doesn't it? Drastically.
Yeah, I mean, I remember about a few months ago, we used to say that Tottenham are sleepwalking towards relegation. We're not sleepwalking anymore. We're running head on into it, aren't we? Almost at an alarming pace. It's this is the worst, form. Well, we're literally the worst league form in the country. I think we're the second worst home form in the entire football pyramid behind Sheffield Wednesday. I saw a stat on Sky Sports News today that, Conor Gallagher, a player that we've paid £200,000 a week for, our highest paid player, the last time he went to our stadium, he was playing for Chelsea. So, what does that say about us? The stats just keep on coming and coming, don't they? But what is certain and why it's so terrifying is that relegation is now not just a threat, it's a reality, isn't it? It just feels like, I mean, any Spurs fan watching those Premier League games on the Wednesday night when West Ham won and Nottingham Forest pulled a draw out, City feared the worst, but then to go and do that against Crystal Palace in the very next game, it's just, the reality in front of us is absolutely terrifying. And the word I keep coming back to is terrifying. It just feels...
Agree.
It's almost like you can't believe what we're facing here. And I know that both Tudor and Thomas Frank keep using the metaphor of the ship, don't they? So I'm going to turn it around. Thursday for me felt like the night that we hit the iceberg, mate. It felt like this is the start of the sinking.
It did. I want to come around to Henry to see if we can open the show, but I have to apologise for even more painful stats that I'm just going to bring the viewers and listeners to understand the gravity and the weight of which we're facing right now. Tottenham, we're winless since December, and we've lost 5 top-flight games in a row for the first time since 2004. We've earned just 10 points at home this season, which is the second worst record across the top 4 divisions of English football, as you said, Bill, after Sheffield Wednesday. That's a second-tier side that's mired in financial distress and have become the earliest EFL side in history to be relegated as early as February. I mean, Tottenham, 0 wins, 4 draws and 7 defeats, 20th in the form table during this period. That Palace defeat, the 18th defeat of the season in all competitions, 2 Premier League wins from 20, from which Spurs have taken just 12 points. That's over the 38 Premier League fixtures. Henry, what have you made of the fall of this great football club? Because I know when we had you on that you really spoke about of the heritage of Tottenham and just the club, for those that maybe younger fans aren't aware of, just how big a club Tottenham are. I've never claimed that we're elite. I've never claimed we're a Liverpool or a Real Madrid, but this is still a massive football club. So what do you make of the fall from grace at the moment?
Well, you are elite. I mean, I've seen you in Champions League finals. I was there sort of doorstepping the Premier League when you were involved, in that. I mean, I was at a very long breakfast conference, if that is a polite way of putting it, when Alan Sugar and Terry Venables were having their issues. I mean, I'm a Londoner. I think any football journalist knows the size of Tottenham Hotspur. It's the name, it's the history. I mean, you referenced 77, 78, the last time you were outside the elite division. I mean, you had players like Glenn Hoddle in there. I mean, he scored a fantastic goal. I think actually it was against Terry Venables' Crystal Palace, one of those. I think Colin Lee headed it across, and he was one of those wonderful Glenn volleys. Steve Perryman was in that team. But just to take those two, particularly Perryman, where is the leader in this team? It comes back to that, and I've been writing about it and boring many people about it. And look, they're probably in 6-year-olds in schools along the Tottenham High Road who can sort of recite this, that there's a lack of leadership from dressing room to dugout to boardroom. And that is the concern. That's nothing new. I mean, I did not get on with Daniel Levy. I think that's and I'm sure you guys didn't. I helped Michael Carrick write his book quite a time ago, and I was given a sort of an insight there. But then I also went over to Munich to have a chat with Eric Dyer, who I've sort of long admired as a person and as a player. And I know the pain he's got, on looking at what's happening at Tottenham, but also the fact he's stuck on 49 caps with England. He's desperate to get the 50th, which ain't going to happen anyway. I mean, Eric actually spoke, because he knew I was a critic of Levy, and he just says, well, look what he's done for the club. And so there's a balance there, and maybe I can bring a balance as someone who's not caught up, as you guys quite rightly are, in the passion. He's done good things. That stadium is fantastic. I'm the son of an architect who worked on sports stadium in the States. So when I see a ground like yours, which is designed for fans in mind, but again, it's the culture, it's the leadership. You are a football club. You shouldn't be just also a music venue. I understand the need of PSR and player wages and to generate money, but you've got to be a football club first and foremost. And I think Tottenham Hotspur have lost sight of that, and that's a lack of leadership. But you know what? We can throw mud at the board. We can throw mud at and Igor Tudor is clearly out of his depth, and Vinay there, who I know. And he is, he will care. And I think when I came on before, I said, well, one thing he will do, apart from he's very supportive as he was at Arsenal with the women's team. But I think he would be a much better communicator. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Levy, realizing his own faults, suggested or brought Vinay in. But it's something about the culture of the place. And just Thomas Frank, when I came on before, I was very supportive of Thomas Frank, having seen what he did at Brentford. But some managers go into a place and don't realize, however intelligent they are, they don't realize the size of the club. And I think Thomas Frank, he went in there and he thought, well, this is Brentford, but with a slightly nicer training ground and a slightly nicer stadium and a bigger squad. He didn't realize the size of the club and the fact that there is a DNA in all club. I mean, Michael Carrick at Manchester United, everyone's talking about the DNA there. DNA matters. It matters because clubs aren't just cash machines for owners. They're not just about pounds, shillings and pence. They are about flesh and blood. They're about, the passion that we were talking about. And one thing I will say in Thomas Frank's defence, and I'll keep coming back to this with Tottenham, the lack of leadership of your players. I went and had lunch with Thomas Frank at Brentford at the training grounds, I think about in the year before he left to come to you. And I watched training, and then I followed the players in, and they were looking at, who's this sort of overweight guy in badly dressed clothes sort of standing in the corner watching us take our boots off. But what I did notice is that they all spoke, and they all made mention of what was going on in training, things they liked. They were all individuals taking responsibility, and we've seen that with their careers, where they've gone on to, the steps that they've taken, the players who are still there now taking responsibility. And I was thinking, well, I hope that Thomas Frank can call on players of that character. So much of football is about technical, and you can throw all the XGs you like at me, but also it's about character. It's about recruiting the right individuals. And I think in Archie Gray, you have an absolute gem. He's not the most skillful player in the world, but I tell you what, he's got character. He will fight for you. And he's 19. You've got a club. I don't want to personalize it too much, but actually the truth is out there, and you guys have been discussing it. You have a captain in Romero who is a very good player and will probably move to a very big club. Well, you're a big club anyway, but he's let you down. 4-game ban. Grow up. You've got Van der Ven, I think, is a terrific player, intelligent individual. Whenever you hear him interview, you think, "Whoa, this is an individual of substance." It wasn't Igor Tudor's fault that he got spooked, and was it Sarr he pulled back?
In the
Palace game. It's individuals making mistakes, individuals not taking responsibility. They go into this amazing training ground, and I'll be there in a couple of weeks watching England train. Responsibility takers. Players have to take responsibility. It's about pride. It's about commitment to you. It's about their financial contract, but also it's about, do you want to be associated with a relegation? So look, we can talk about bringing a new manager in. I agree with you. Igor Tudor is out of his depth. We can have a go at the board, and clearly changes are going to have to be made, or they're going to have to look at themselves and tweak and change. But you're in a dogfight, and the only people who can really turn it round are those 11 on the pitch.
So we're going to try and unpick where it's all gone wrong, and I think you've done an incredible job of summarising the situation there. One of the things that I will always look back on, particularly if we do end up getting relegated, heaven forbid that we won't, is the January transfer window, which ended up being a bit of a disaster for Tottenham. So forgetting transfers for a second, Paratici, who was, given the task of being director of football, hired in October, was very quickly announced that he was unhappy and was going to leave for Fiorentina. And suddenly there were also rumours that, he wasn't particularly a fan of Frank and possibly wanted him gone. So there was lots of sort of drama off the field and off the field when Tottenham really needed to focus on recruitment in that January transfer window. Obviously, they sold Brennan Johnson. They brought in Conor Gallagher. They lost, I think, 5 first-team players to injury in January, and then they didn't bring anyone else in other than Sousa, quite a young left-back. And Tottenham fans kind of look back on that transfer window as being one that was disappointing. I know Lange came out afterwards and said he blames things like the European competition, making it difficult to sign players. And he said it wasn't really anybody out there we can improve. But I remember on the press conference on the Friday before the last January transfer weekend, Thomas Frank admitted that the squad is now weaker than it was at the beginning of January, which I think is unforgivable and something which we may look back on with deep regret. I was just wondering, Henry, what is your take on that sort of January transfer window, and how on earth Tottenham could be in a position where they started it, stronger than when they ended it, and such a pivotal. You mentioned there it's all on the 11 players. Do you think it's crazy now that they didn't get more help in that January transfer window?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, sorry, the point that you were making about Thomas Frank was that he was being sort of negative towards the players who were still there, or he felt they should have acted more strongly in the market.
Yeah, because he came out and said, I think it was particularly because of the injuries. He said the squad is now weaker than it was at the beginning. So he kind of hinted at that, yeah.
Well, he was right. I mean, I don't know whether it's what is happening with all your injuries, but it is crazy. I mean, look at that list there, and I don't think we've got all of them on screen. And these are really good players. I mean, Ben Davies, I've known since his Swansea days, and he's a proper leader, in a quieter way. But you need players like him. You miss a player like Maddison. I mean, England have got so many number 10s. Even fit, he wouldn't. Well, very unlikely go to the World Cup, but there's a spark. He doesn't hide. He's actually someone you would want in a dogfight like this. Kulusevski is probably your best player, and look, he's been out for most of the season, hasn't he? So I mean, that's been terribly frustrating. Whether you're playing him off the right or playing him more as a 10, I just think he's a terrific player. His work rate as well as his skill, and I think you've missed him. So I think there has to be that element of sympathy with the manager for all these injuries. I don't know the reason why you've got so many injuries. Sometimes I'm sure Spurs are intelligent enough to actually look at, is there any thread going through? Is it something at training? Whether it's, I can't believe it's the pitches, because the pitches there are so good. Whether it's challenges or whatever. But I'm sure they will look at that. I mean, you've been to the training ground. I mean, I've been to parts of it that you don't usually get into, and you look at that and you think, wow, this is like NASA level in terms of what they've got. So they've got good people working there. This is not a Sunday league team you've got there. And again, just this character. So coming back to your point, Bill, about the January transfer window. Okay, Manchester City got a lot of money, and we can sort of debate about that money. But they acted decisively. They had an issue at centre half. They went and got Mark Gay. They had an issue. They need a little bit more flair on, coming in off the right or playing as a 10. They went and got Antoine Semenyo. Tottenham and I know it's an ENIC thing, and they don't want to pay big wages, but they paid decent wages for Conor Gallagher.
Yeah.
And you look at a player like him, and I actually thought he would be a good buy because he's not the most technical of players, but he is a leader. Chelsea fans were heartbroken when he left. You saw that big banner they had up in the shed, and the picture of him, but very pertinent, was the fact that he was wearing an armband in that banner, that Tifo banner. So yeah, but it comes back to leadership, and you just hope that anyone who goes into the board at Tottenham gets that video of Antonio Conte when he was in a huff after the game at Southampton and St Mary's, and then rushed off to get an easy jet back to Italy. No speedy boarding. He just wanted to get out. And everything he said then, which was about the players, but also about the culture of the club, he's spot on.
Yep.
And so it's a cultural thing. But I come back to that. These players have got to fight. They've got to fight for you. They've got to fight for the shirt, and they've got to fight for their own credibility. And they've got to fight to show that clubs who may buy them in the summer know they're getting good characters as well as good players.
In your experience, Henry, again, as someone that's been around football for so many years, and again, you've interviewed players that are either going to win a league or be relegated. The concern, I think, for a lot of Tottenham fans right now is they're looking at this group, and bar Archie Gray, I'd put Matisse Tell and Richarlison into that bill. Feel free to name many other players I've maybe left out there. The worry, I think, at the moment is that Vicario looks mentally gone, but physically just isn't good enough for where we want to be. We're hearing him being linked away. You've got Romero, these continuous links around Atléti and a move to Spain. You've had Mickey van der Ven in the last 6 to 12 months being linked with a move to Liverpool, did the overlap interview. I'm not suggesting that interview is anything to lead to that, but there's been a lot of talk around him. You're now hearing Pedro Porro is being linked away. Destiny Udogie is being linked. We've seen Lange in the last 24 hours. He's been linked with a move to Newcastle. Lucas Bergvall, a young player, being linked with a move to Chelsea, Aston Villa. So in your experience right now, these players that there's been suggestions that already they've got wage caps going into place if they do get relegated, just how fully focused will they be in the task of hand? And will they already be instructing their agents to look for moves elsewhere? Because I think a lot of Tottenham fans are feeling that, like you've said, this is the time for leadership, players to step up, take responsibility for where we are. Because you're right, when the team crossed the white line, there is only so much a manager can do. And we'll come on to Tudor and what we've made of him so far and his failings. But these players, how bought in would they be at this stage, Henry? And do you think they are already speaking to their agents and putting feelers out for the summer? Because I'll be honest, if you agree, Bill, that's what it feels like when you're watching this group. There's a real lack of any real fight, courage, desire to get us out of this mess. And I keep saying it, the likes of Forest and West Ham players, they look a lot more well-equipped for this battle. And it's showing. It's showing in that form table at the moment, Henry.
Yeah, I mean, Nuno must be laughing. I mean, when he looks at at Forest and with you, and I've always got on with Nuno. I mean, look, he won't take any pleasure in other people's travails. He's not that sort of character. But I tell you what, he'll be absolutely determined to stay up. So just one thing on Bergvall. Everything I hear about him, is that he's a good kid and that he's got the right attitude. And you see it in games. He never hides in games. He's always wanting the ball. But he's a kid as well. And some of the more experienced players should actually have that attitude. So look, I'd like to see him back for you because, okay, maybe he gives the ball away once or twice, but I think he's got a good attitude as well. I mean, one or two of your academy kids, I mean, you've got a good academy. But look, it comes back to recruitment. It comes back to recruiting the right characters as well as the right technical caliber. But if you keep selling your leading goal scorer, and if my maths and my chronology is right, Harry Kane, Son, and Brennan Johnson, I mean, I know you guys didn't always have the best of sort of, relationships with Brennan Johnson, which I always sound slightly strange because whenever I've seen him, I've always seen him score goals for you, but also he does seem to contribute. I don't know whether it's because he doesn't take on his man as regular as you want, but you know what? How many wingers do nowadays? They all seem to cut inside. And then of course he came on the other day, and I thought that highlighted that even more. So yeah, but it's about fight. It is about, you've got the players to keep you up. Just on Vicario, I mean, I can remember that 77 season that you went down, and Pat Jennings was injured that season, for chunks of that season. I think Barry Danes stepped in. But this is Tottenham's recruitment. You then sold an iconic goalkeeper who still had another, I think, 8 years in him. 9 years in him, because he was still playing in the '86 World Cup for Northern Ireland. You were selling him, and I think you sold him for what is it, 40 grand or something ridiculous? Obviously, it was a lot cheaper but there were goalkeepers going in that period for 200 grand, and you were offloading Pat Jennings because you thought so. Look, bad recruitment, bad sales is not a sort of Tottenham prerogative of this era. And I think Barry Danes actually, he did a decent job, and you picked Brighton to promotion back to the top flight. But you shouldn't be in this situation. You should have a better goalkeeper. I think he's let you down on too many occasions. I know it's complicated now with the fact that referees don't stop any of the sort of the holding and balking, but he doesn't inspire much confidence when a ball's being whipped in.
I know, Bill, you're going to probably come and just ask Henry around the parategy and the fact that we were linked to Tudor beforehand and how that works. But Bill, just to ask you directly, you mentioned the January window there. I was just doing a bit of research in terms of what we could have had and what we might have had when you go back. And like you said about the Lange comments, which again just screams just maybe pure laziness or this unwillingness to take a risk. But where we are right now, you think, how did we not take a risk? Because you look at some of the players that moved in the January window, who are the one we tried for was Semenyo, but you had the likes of, don't get me wrong, not everyone wanted some of you at the time being linked because you was on the shows we built at the time. But he's registered 9 goal involvements in the last 10 matches. You look at the player that Bournemouth signed, Rayan, how he has started life there. Dare I say, you look at the way certain other players have gone in, made a difference. West Ham, to be fair, what do you think about West Ham? They did go and buy, and look at the way they've responded. The likes of Pablo, Castellanos and Disassi. I'm not one that would have wanted Disassi. I think we said at the time, Bill, we don't want anywhere near our football club. But it feels that a lot of those clubs did take the window a lot more seriously than we did, Bill, to back up the point you were making there earlier.
Yeah, and you only have to look at the team that we played on Thursday, Crystal Palace, who made 5 signings in January.
Yeah.
Strand Larsen and Gessan have both hit the ground running for them, scored plenty of goals in the game since, and they've essentially dragged themselves out. And I think the one that I personally think the most about, and one that Spurs fans will be terrified this week, is Ademola Lookman, who we know, has been an incredible player in Europe, in international tournaments and domestic European tournaments. Scored that hat-trick in the Europa League final. Obviously has a bit of unfinished business in the Premier League. And now obviously he's ended up at Atletico. I think he scored 4 goals in his first 6 games. And now Tottenham are facing the prospect of him in the Champions League on this week. So that would be a big one, I think, for me. But, I think the idea that there weren't any players that can improve us is crazy. And I think, when we mentioned Brennan Johnson, obviously, the day after we sold Brennan Johnson, Kudus got injured against Sunderland. So, the signs, they had plenty of time to act in January. That was on the 2nd of January, I think, that Kudus got injured. So it is really, really frustrating. And I just wondered, Henry, what you sort of made of the fact that Paratici, who was, he's been a figure around Tottenham for a number of years now. Obviously, he had that kind of period where he was banned, and then this year in particular, he ended up at Fiorentina. And I think Fiorentina ended up with the January transfer window signing more players than Spurs did. And then he made a couple of what you could label as pointed comments at the board when he joined Fiorentina. He was talking about how this board are serious. I just wonder what you make of him leaving Tottenham, and whether that's a blow, or do you think that was always inevitable, and the fact that he was sort of hired was maybe a callback to maybe him owing a job from before?
I mean, it sounded like it was inevitable, and it does seem to have been the season of movement of sporting directors of football. I mean, we didn't really have them sort of 10, 15 years ago, and then you see Monchi leaving at the start of the season. Edu looks like he's leaving Forest after a sort of slightly controversial time there. I'm just falling out with Nuno or vice versa. But I just think that you have to get the right sporting director of football in place. They then go and pick the coach, who are now head coaches, who obviously they have some influence on recruitment because they have to work with the players, but they also have to reflect the way that Tottenham play and the history of Tottenham. And looking at it from the outside, you've always played a certain way. I remember that Ardiles team. What was it? The polo formation with no central midfield. But I tell you what, it was great to watch, and it was in keeping with Tottenham style. It was about entertainment. And the Tottenham fans I know one of the frustrations is that you're just not entertained. I mean, as well as the results being the footballs,
God,
honestly, some of the football, and you're thinking, this is not what Tottenham Hotspur are about. You are the club of Hoddle, of Ardiles. I mean, I'm writing a book at the moment, and I was going over some of my sort of past interviews, and I did a long interview with Rebrov and Pavlyuchenko. And you had a great chant for him, which was good. And he probably didn't do as well for you as he and you would have wanted, but at least he was an entertainer. You're the club of Teddy Sheringham, of Les Ferdinand. I'm just sort of feel like I'm wandering through a sort of Panini sticker book, and just sort of these names are what you're all about. That team, when you went down and came back up again, you had Glenn Hoddle playing 40 odd games in a 42 game season. On some terrible pitches when there was hooliganism. I mean, that game at the Goldstone ground with Brighton I think it was in the April time of 78. That was a tense period. So I'm going down slightly memory lane because it's a lot of it was my era of first watching football.
Keep going, you're making me feel better.
But honestly, that hooliganism was around there, and there was I think the game, the one at the Goldstone ground, was held up by about 15 minutes because of fighting between Brighton fans and Spurs fans. There were 50 arrests. I think 50 went to hospital. I mean, it was it was a different era. But the point I'm trying to make is that you had good players then. Hoddle. I think McNabb was playing for you. Went on to play for City. Jerry Armstrong. You had what I would call strong characters, and obviously I've met them. Been fortunate to meet them through work, whether in the lounges at Tottenham or when they've been interviewing, or Glenn, obviously, when he was England manager. And, I wrote a book on England, and he was incredibly helpful. And you just think these are real individuals of great substance. I've got so much time for Glenn as a human being. Obviously what he said and with the way he lost the England job, we all know about that. And that was a pretty despicable moment. But he cares about Tottenham. And this is coming back to your point, and Ricky, again, coming back to that interview that you did. What truly came over was the fact that you care. And Tottenham Hotspur need more people at the heart of what they call a business, you would call a football club, a community club, something that's passionate, a religion, people who care. So anyway, that's just a broader point. So coming back to your point about sporting directors, absolutely. I've been in and seen them and just heard all the XGs and how they're going to get all these fantastic players. But it's the old test. Do they care?
Yep.
Do these players care? Will they run through a brick wall? And they'll go, oh, well, their running levels are amazing. Just look at their stats. But do they run as hard when they're 2-0 down as when they're 2-0 up? And it comes back to the fact you're in a dogfight and you need players who are going to run and going to work and are going to suffer to get you out of this.
Just on that really quickly, sorry. One thing I noticed about the Crystal Palace game in particular, in the first team, on the bench, in the coaching staff, in the manager, above that as well, and the board of directors, there is not a single person that has come through the ranks at Tottenham anymore. There's not a single player that's come through at Tottenham. There's not a single coach that's come through at Tottenham. Obviously, Matt Wells has gone to Colorado. Tudor has got a staff of completely new coaches, which none of them have any links to Tottenham.
And some of them aren't here yet because they haven't had their...
Some of them aren't even here yet.
And they might not get here.
Literally, they might land at Heathrow and take their bags off the carousel and go right back round again. It's a revolving door. I mean, you are a probably £billion business, and there's still a slight sort of corner shop mentality.
And do you think that really emphasises what you're saying, really, that it kind of feels like as a fan, our identity has been stripped these days, and we don't have, Mikey Moore, for example, is on loan in Scotland. Yeah. There's not a single player in the first team that came through the ranks at Tottenham anymore. Do you think that might be part of the reason? I'll come to you in a sec, Rick, as well on this. But do you think that as well, Ricky, that might be a big reason why we're in the mess that we're in? Just because, put it simply, like does anyone even care that much about Tottenham at the moment? What,
of your players or generally?
In general, it seems like all of our members of staff at the moment. Do you agree with that, Rick? It's just what it kind of feels like.
I agree. And also on that point you're saying there, Bill, about identity. Do you know what's fascinating me at the moment? And Henry, get your take on this. I know you spoke about Vinay before, Henry. We spoke about it off air as well. And what's been fascinating in the time that he's been here is, and this might upset people because I know this is just the way it is at Tottenham. I know, Bill, you've heard about this as well. The amount of staff that have come from Arsenal into Tottenham's building, right? So believe me, and tell me if I'm wrong here, I think, Bill, minimum you've got one of the marketing directors that are there. We had that situation last week, Henry. I'm not sure if you saw it around a scout, right, who was there. I think he's only there. This scout was only going to be. Yeah. This scout was only going to be, I think, trying to nurture kind of 4 to 5 year olds through to the club. But it doesn't matter if he was going to nurture 4 to 5 year olds or 21 year olds, 22 or whoever. It's just this mentality that I think the problem with Spurs at the moment is that you're right. We are going through, Bill, as you said there, and so that you come on to this, Henry. We're going through this identity crisis where it feels that in our building, we've been infiltrated by, this might sound real tribalism, we've been infiltrated by so many Arsenal people that anyone Spurs that works in that building, and I've got to say this because, and you know this as well, Bill, from speaking to the club, there is some amazing, amazing people at work at Tottenham. Forget the board for a second. There's great people in the building at Tottenham that don't deserve what they're going through right now. And it's really important that I say this, that the wonderful people behind the scenes in some of the comms departments that are just genuine Spurs fans, I know it's difficult for them because they're to somewhat restricted in terms of what they can and they can't say. But what do you make of that, Henry? The amount of people that have come from Arsenal into Tottenham via Vinay and how that would make an impact in the building about that lack of an identity that's going on?
Well, first, it's bad optics. Secondly, they would have to be absolutely exceptional at their job to make that move. I mean, it's not quite sort of Sol Campbell in reverse, but it is, it's not great. But then I guess, I mean, I'm not just defending Vinay on this, but I think maybe if they're people that he knows and he trusts and they are good. But, there are a lot of people who work in football and maybe there are others that he could get in. I absolutely echo your point about who was I went to see? I went to see Alan Mullery when I was writing a book, and I went into the sort of like the Legends Lounge where all the sort of, the players who do the sort of, the suites and the corporates are there before the game, and they are all there. They are all Tottenham through and through. They're still there, a lot of them, and they're in there. They're proud to put on that blazer,
Tottenham blazer, the blazer
with the crest on it. They're proud, and you see them, and it's like time hasn't changed, and they're back in the dressing room of years ago talking about Tottenham, and that is the heartbeat of the club. Coming back to the point about DNA, I mean, one of the first things that Michael Carrick did was get Kobbie Mainoo back in the team because he's someone who understands. Now, look, that's Manchester United, but absolutely, you should have, one of your own, Harry Kane.
No one.
No one.
You've got no one. I mean, look, I know Harry well, and I've done interviews with him all over the place, and his love of Tottenham Hotspur. I can remember he was just starting out, and he said, "I want Jimmy Greaves' record," and I was going, "You're a long way off that, mate." But that was just so important, and the honour of being captain. Look, Harry's moved on. But where is the next Harry Kane? You're not going to get someone of his amazing character as a human being, as well as his ability and his driving. But you just want people who wear that shirt and not simply, on the pitch, but throughout the club. And I will defend the club because the people I've met, the stewards that I've met, the people in the comms department, they're proud to wear that. They'll never kick a ball for Tottenham Hotspur, but they're just proud to represent. And I absolutely can guarantee that they will be hurting.
Well, on that point, and before we do, Bill, you got anything else to say on that? You want to add anything to that in terms of how concerned is that for you? We've got, at least, again, not to call these people out personally, because again, that's not what I'm about. But when you've got so many Arsenal people working in the Tottenham building, and look, I'm not stupid. It's a massive football club, and we've got a massive department of staff, over 850 plus people, because not all of them are going to be Tottenham fans, right? But I do worry about, Bill, that point around our identity being lessened kind of day by day in that building by the amount of people that are in there that maybe don't have Tottenham at their heart. Is that fair, Bill, from your side? What do you think?
I think so, and it's been a bit of a theme of the season, hasn't it? Obviously, it started as a bit of a joke with that Thomas Frank Arsenal Cup thing, and then obviously when he ended up leaving, it ended up being, reports coming out that he was almost obsessed by Arsenal and was speaking about them all the time. And then obviously, I think it's all compounded by the fact, when you talk about the tribalism earlier, Spurs fans will be feeling naturally more anxiety this season anyway, because Arsenal are at the top of the league and winning almost everything in their sight, and it looks like they might win the league and we might get relegated. So it's been a bit of a theme of the season, hasn't it? The Arsenal thing, Rick, and then obviously it's been compounded even further by two absolutely horrendous North London derbies, where we've lost
with Eze obviously compounding it.
Yeah,
who's Eze? Who's Eze? We'll never look at.
We nearly signed it. We nearly signed. So it's that.
Well, Gibbs White as well. You've got to nail these things. I know Gibbs White, and there was the sort of the politics at Forest, and I get all that. But you've got to get these. You've got to nail these deals.
Oh, you
And
do wonder as well.
I,
Sliding doors moment, Bill. Go on.
I know.
Take it away.
That's what I was just about to say. I mean, he scored against
Yeah.
Man City the other day, didn't he? And
Yeah.
you just kind of wonder that obviously in the wake of Daniel Levy, if both of those deals managed to get through, we might be looking at Thomas Frank still being here. But I was just going to say, Rick, hasn't it? The Arsenal has been a bit of a theme this entire season, hasn't it? Unfortunately, it's just been something in which we've been wrestling with, as the season has gone on.
And I wouldn't mind, just to make matters worse, look where we are and look where they are. And there's obsession about them. It's unbelievable, isn't it, where we are right now? And that only compounds it, Henry, as well, the fact of where they are and where we are and the landscape and the nature of where the two clubs are going. That only heightens the frustration.
But it's taken 5 years for Mikel Arteta to get in that position. And I've always liked Arteta because I spoke to Manchester City players and, like Raheem Sterling, and said, what's he like as a coach? He's being linked with Arsenal. And they said he's fantastic one-on-one. He will make you better. But look, it's taken time for them to get into this situation. It's taken good recruitment. And, Declan Rice was £105 million. And I can't imagine his wages are particularly small. But I take your point. But the worst thing that could happen to North London is for you two teams to be in separate divisions, because however much Arsenal fans might crow about that, the North London derby, and I've been fortunate to cover. Look, today is the day of the Old Firm derby, and the scenes we saw at the end of that are disgraceful. But we know about the edge. You go up to Liverpool, Everton, Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City. Wherever you go in the world, there's extraordinary edge between these games. And, when we sort of debate about how much you guys particularly, you pay so much for your tickets. And I think that's probably, we haven't mentioned ticket prices. You pay a hell of a lot. Okay, it's a fantastic stadium. I get all that. But you pay a hell of a lot and you are being shortchanged. And in any other industry, you would go to the box office and say, I want my money back because what I was promised, I wasn't delivered for the cost, wherever that's West End, whatever. But I just think that is, you don't want the North London derby not to be played. So I don't know, Arsenal fans, I don't know what they think, but if they would be a bit stupid if they felt, oh, it's great, we're not going to have the North London derby next season. I just don't think that. Anyway.
Well, look, we are going to.
That works.
I agree. We are going to quickly squeeze in our first break of the show for our listeners that are on audio. Thanks to all, I think they're over 7,500 that are watching us live. We appreciate all your support. I'm joined by the superb Billie T back alongside me. We've got another wonderful journalist giving us a bit of a different view on all things Tottenham rather than us ranting and raving and screaming. We're joined by the superb Henry Winter. Henry, also, you've got this wonderful podcast at the moment. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I wonder whether the guest you've just had recently might end up being a candidate for Tottenham in Sean Dyche, depending on how things go. Tell us about the podcast. Where can we find the wonderful podcast you've got out there at the moment?
Well, it's on, like you. I mean, everyone else in the country seems to have a podcast, so I thought I'd better get involved. I think journalists, we become sort of decathletes at the moment. We have to do a little bit of everything. So yeah, it's just I've known Christian Purslow for a long time, and I just think it's like you two, you've got a good balance, but between you, and I think that I've been trying to get into boardrooms for almost 40 years, and Christian's been barricading the doors and keeping me away from the cheap wine or the expensive wine, and I just need to find out more. And I think that fans, it is your club. I don't want to keep coming back to it. It's your club. So everything that goes on, not everything that goes on in the boardroom, because a lot of it has to be confidential. I get that. But actually, there has to be more accountability. And that's why I'm disappointed with because I thought he would actually be, talk to you guys more, because that is what he's like as an individual. And I don't know whether it's the culture of Tottenham or whatever, or maybe it's the sort of tensions of the situation. But the boardroom has to be open because it's been closed to you for too long. And that's why I can remember there was this was a few years back, there was a protest opposite the ground, and it was a Levy Enoch protest. And I just went and talked to them. I can't remember where I was, at the Telegraph or the Times. I think it was the Times. And I just sort of wrote a piece on actually what you were asking for. This is about 5-6 years ago. It might have been pre-COVID. And it was a small protest. Do you remember it? It was, you had the banners hanging.
I think you spoke to my friend Billy, my other friend Billy Cairns. Yeah. You'll be listening to this.
And I remember writing about this and just sort of saying, actually, everything they said was completely balanced. You know, you weren't asking for Messi to be parachuted in. You were asking for actual for care and proper stewardship. And every owner, chairman should realise that they are custodians. And everyone go, oh, that's a little bit romantic. It's all about money. But it's not. You know, you're not running a corner shop here. You're not running a supermarket. You know, Look at the problems that Ratcliffe's got into in Manchester United because he thought he was running another business rather than a football club, which is it's a religion. It's about soul. It's about people. It's about livelihood and life and what, you know, yeah. So, yeah, I just remember going and just talking to them because I was just walking up from Seven Sisters and just sort of chatting to them. I thought everything they said makes sense. How could the board not listen to everything they said? You know, they weren't throwing stones. They weren't just, you know. Anyway, I mean, I can remember being at Fulham in '87 when there was a very real threat of the club going under, and I think it was Cadbury Estates were going to build on it. And people said, right, we have to storm the pitch. And I think I was in the Hammersmith end, and the stewards opened the gate, horrendous time, fences, and we all went on the pitch at half time. And I was just talking to the Fulham fans there, and everything they wanted, was from the goodness of their heart. And some of the headlines were, oh, you know, pitch invasion. Of course, it was in the ear of hooligans, and people can sort of slightly misconstrue what was a genuine protest. Anyway, and you guys, that's why you are so important, what you do, because the club will listen to this and they know that you care and they know that there are thousands listening in who might not go on every march, who might not sing whatever songs in the ground critical of the board, but they're listening to you now because they believe in what you two say and what your other colleagues say, and the board has to listen to that. And it's a general thing, everyone has to be together if you're going to move forward. And I just find elements of the club is just too disparate. Get back together. Anyway, that's my rant for the day. But it's just, you know, you're a great club, and I don't think it would actually take too much with shrewder recruitment, a few better appointments in key positions, getting Robbie Keane in long term. I'm a big fan of his, and I understand the whole Pochettino thing, but, you know, having interviewed Lopetegui last week for a column and what he went through with Real Madrid, and you put up the picture of Pochettino, so you know where I'm going. And I love Poch to bits, and there's nothing better than having a coffee with him in central London and having a chat with him. And one of the great mistakes in your history was him not getting the backing after the Champions League final. I mean, that's old ground, but that's very, very true. But I just think Robbie Keane, just on Pochettino, can you imagine what it'd be like if you did try and get Pochettino? You know,
what do you tell Henry? You tell us. What do you think?
I love Pochettino to bits. But seriously, just on the eve of a World Cup, on the eve of any tournament, if you're trying to prize out the manager of the hosts, not just any team going out there. I mean, Lopetegui was going out there with Spain. It became known, and these things always leak, that he was going to Real Madrid. And 2 days out from their first game, I think they were in St. Petersburg, beautiful St. Petersburg, he was unceremoniously kicked out. And it would just be absolute carnage if you tried to get Pochettino out. I think he's a fantastic coach, but I just think, there are issues there. I mean, I just think maybe you look to the future. I mean, Robbie Keane's obviously got DNA. He had a couple of seasons with you. He's obviously doing well as a coach. He's unproven, but you know what? There are a lot of quite good young managers around. So maybe give him a chance. If the whole Pochettino thing doesn't work, but you cannot approach him before the tournament. I promise you, I went through it with Capello before 2010 with Inter Milan and England, and it all that they took out the break clause in his contract, and it ended up costing the FA a fair bit of money because England stank South Africa out. I remember Michael Carrick wandering around just being ignored by Capello at training in Rustenburg. So it just causes chaos. I mean, look, great for us in the media if it happens, because you'll fill us, you'll be doing emergency podcasts every 10 minutes.
We are now.
We already are. You are. You'll be out of your winter clothes and into your Bermuda shorts, and you'll be you'll need to move your wardrobe into your into that cold room, because it will be. Look, I love Poch to bits. I think he's one of the great individuals that you can meet. Lovely guy. He always mentions Michael Owen dived in the Argentina game in 2002. I was going, Maurizio, move on. I just think he represented you so well. And in fact, on our show this morning on TalkSport, we were debating best last minute goals on the back of William Sula's goal for Newcastle United last week. And I mean, one of the ones I immediately went was Lucas Moura against Ajax 2019. I mean, the hat trick, you guys were probably there. And it was unbelievable. A goal of great significance. And Poch in tears on his knees, because he knew what it meant for him to get to the Champions League final. But he knew what it meant for Tottenham Hotspur, what it meant for you, what it meant for the players. So, yeah, look, I love Poch to bits. But wow.
So you're saying, Henry, just to be clear on Poch, you're saying whether it's right now to parachute him in, or the manager in the summer, whether it's Tottenham in the Premier League or the Championship, which we'll come on to just shortly with you think that's a very hard move to do, regardless, now or in the summer? You think very difficult, very, very difficult, both?
There cannot be an approach while the US are still playing. I just...
Can you have such a thing as a gentleman's agreement where you go to Poch now and you've already got him?
Gentleman's agreement. We had a gentleman's agreement with the German FA, and that turned into an absolute carnage. I think that was around the Terry era, and that was over a World Cup. No, there's no such thing as a gentleman's agreement in football. There's absolutely no way that there could be an approach without it being leaked. I mean, my colleagues across Fleet Street are very good.
Should we go straight to Tudor, Bill? What do you think? Should we go straight to Tudor now and gonna just get the gauge? Or
I just want to say one thing on him that Henry mentioned. I'm particularly fascinated with his insight in particular because of the podcast that he does. Me and Rick always have this running joke where we seem to spend more time talking about things in the boardroom than anything else in Tottenham Hotspur. And it seems like a lot of the media attention at Tottenham is on the boardroom rather than the football staff and the manager. And it seems like that's almost, more than any other club other than possibly Man United with the Ratcliffe. What is it about Tottenham and the way that Tottenham is run? And do you think it's sort of possibly a symptom of how big Daniel Levy's shadow hung over the club? What is it about Tottenham and the boardroom that is, seems to get so much media attention and, minutes in the columns and, on TV? Because it doesn't seem to happen for many other Premier League clubs. Why is it Tottenham so fascinating at board level, do you think?
I think there's a fascination with Daniel Levy, or certainly there was, because of his influence, not obviously just at Tottenham Hotspur, and he is a fan, but also within the Premier League. I mean, you talk to, the sort of power brokers or people at other clubs, and Daniel was a very big force there. So I understand you look at it, understandably, through a Tottenham Hotspur prism, but from a Premier League perspective, his influence behind the scenes on committees and general meetings was substantial. His views were considered because of his experience, and he's clearly a very intelligent individual. So, I mean, you are a bit of a soap opera, which is, I don't say that as a compliment. I mean, my wife used to be in a soap opera, so I do like soap operas. But just with, you don't want it to be a soap opera. You don't want it to be, the characters you want. I mean, in a way, you almost like it like the old days where the boards were seen and not heard.
Yeah.
But they are characters, and look, that's a slightly reflection on the media that we're interested in them. But also, I think coming back to your specific point, which I do get, is that it is what goes on in the boardroom is symptomatic of what we will call the headers and volleys, i.e., what goes on the pitch, and that comes back to the old issue of leadership and lack of.
Okay. Well, I feel like there's so much to get through here, Henry. You could be for 4 hours. We have not even touched the surface yet.
I'll stay until your temperature gets above freezing in your outhouse.
You're too kind. Listen, for us out there, thank you again. We've got nearly over 10,500 that are watching us on the last one on Spurs. Listen, I know it sounds silly. Me and Bill always joke that we've been in a crisis for so long. We're unsure what it's going to be like at some point when normality is restored. We will bring up with Henry. I do want to bring up a bit more about Vinay and Johan, but I think, Bill, maybe let's pivot to where we are with Igor Tudor, right? Because we've seen 3 games so far, 3 different formations, a lot of talk about boats. I mean, Henry quoted Pochettino there earlier. We had the cow analogy, if you remember him, a long time ago. Bill, how stunned are you that on the evening's Atletico Madrid game, he's still in charge, Bill? Are you surprised by that before I get Henry's take on Tudor and what Spurs are or are not going to do with regards to Croatian's future?
I think so, because we're in such a unique situation that we've essentially boiled our future down into, well, what was 12 Premier League games is now 9 Premier League games. And when you sort of look at that as a journey of possibility for Tudor, he's lost the first 3, which is about the first quarter of them. And it just feels like he's had no reaction. We seem to be the only Premier League team that I can remember that didn't get any kind of managerial bounce. That seems to be the standard for any manager coming in. We haven't had that. In fact, you could argue that we've got worse. I think, fans were into that Arsenal game thinking, well, don't want to use the term free hit because there's never a free hit against your biggest rivals, but I don't think there was any expectation for Spurs fans to go and beat Arsenal. But Fulham and Crystal Palace, you look at 2 fixtures, when you're in a relegation fight, are possibly more favourable, but we got totally outplayed by Fulham, and a 5-minute spell of madness against Crystal Palace cost us dearly. And we haven't really seen anything, I would say, to hang our hat on. And we said that about Thomas Frank, and it seems to be the same again. But I just think that there's been some baffling decisions, hasn't there, Rick, about playing players in positions. I know Pochettino played centre back and Archie Gray played right back, and Archie Gray, as always, does a fantastic job wherever he plays on the pitch. But before that, we had Conor Gallagher playing on the right wing against Fulham, and it's just there's been no reaction from it. So yeah. I think Spurs, it's just, it's crazy that we're 3 games into a managerial career and talking about him being sacked, but it just seems inevitable at this point, right, Rick?
It sounds crazy because I know people outside of Tottenham that watch us, they think, who are these self-entitled fans that just want to keep sacking managers? And honestly, I promise you, it really isn't about that, Henry. But, since he's taken charge, as Bill said there, 3 defeats, 9 goals conceded, 1 red card later. It looks like the decision has massively, massively backfired. He has a track record of fixing clubs, but we look more toxic now than what it looked like before he came in. And he was meant to make us united. And I thought what was one of the fascinating things to let you come in on this point is that after the Fulham game, he absolutely tore into the players. And I was sitting there thinking, is that a way you're going to try and motivate a group to then try and perform for you when they're already on the floor? They're already bereft of confidence. We haven't won a game all year. We need a lift. And it feels like he already lost them in the second game. But then by the third game, like Bill has said, we've changed the team. We've got players playing out of position. Conor Gallagher's on the right wing. Xavi Simons is on the left. Pedro Porro, the other day, was playing as a right centre-back. These players were thinking, what the hell is going on? Henry, tell us we're not going crazy here. Can you understand why fans think, this isn't working with Tudor already?
Do you know what was interesting? Just looking at some of the Tottenham forums and following you guys on social media, within 10 minutes of the team of kickoff, everyone's going, well, this is ridiculous. And there's almost a uniformity of opinion about why is he doing this? And those positioning or repositioning of players simply won't work. So again, players have to take responsibility, but look, he's clearly out of his depth. I don't think that all fans are critical of other fans. There's a innate rivalry, tribalism, call it what you want. But I don't think there's a feeling that Tottenham fans are entitled, self-entitled. You're entitled to have players delivering for you because you pay a lot of money. You are entitled to have a board which actually does the best for your club and has proper leadership and cares, or appears to care as much as you do. I don't, this is the second or third time you've used the word entitled. I'm absolutely worried about. First, it doesn't matter what other fans think because it's your club, your problem, and, it's your soap opera. But actually, I think probably most fans would say, well, actually, they'd agree with you that you're being shortchanged.
And obviously, this was another big call from Vinay and Lange. After, this season has been a bit of a disaster on sort of every conceivable level. We know the big decisions that they made to hire Paratici backfired, to get rid of Thomas Frank, or to keep him for so long and then eventually get rid of him and then bring someone else in. Do you think if, Tudor does go wrong, as it looks like it's going to, how do you think that reflects on the sort of leadership above, as you've already sort of touched on before? But how badly will this reflect on them if they get rid of another manager, 4 or 5 games into getting rid of the one previously?
It looks very badly on them. I think, it was interesting hearing some of your fellow fans talking about actually, let's have a weakened team in the Champions League because we've got big Premier League games coming up. I just think that would just be a disaster. I just think, what sort of statement does that send out to any sort of potential manager coming in. You want to be fighting for these, you fought to get into, via a different route, but you fought to get into the Champions League. Stay in there and fight for it. I mean, if you do get through to the next round, that's worth, I think it's £9.4 million alone, and that's what boards tend to look at. They tend to look at money. So I'm trying to come back to your question. Which was it about the future of Igor Tudor? About those two. Absolutely.
Future everyone.
They'll come. If sporting directors and chief executives are being criticised, the manager tends to get sacrificed. If the board, i.e. the ownership model, Joe Lewis, his daughter, is it? I always get the combination wrong. Is it the son-in-law?
Well, now we've got Viv Lewis. Who
I know
is
Viv.
Viv.
I don't know her, but
we've got Nick Boy. This is another fascinating thing about it. We've got Nick Boycher.
Yeah,
I think he's the grandson.
There's
an in-law element.
There's an in-law element to this. I mean,
I think it's son-in-law.
Yeah, and he's very influential. And with great respect, I mean, he might have an amazing footballing background, but actually, how much does he know? There's an element of you've got to appoint proper football people in these significant positions. And so he's got the connection with the Lewis family, and I understand that. But does he actually have the expertise?
Well, I know there's a point that was made actually on the Athletic, and Bill, if you want to pick up on this, and Henry, you're more than welcome to, around I think it's the directorship and ownership test and who has taken it and who hasn't taken it. It's quite fascinating that, for those that aren't aware and from the outside looking in, we've not had anything public from the Lewis family. They haven't really uttered a word at all since taking control back from the club after sacking Levy in September. And they haven't taken this ownership and directors test. They are not public-facing directors of the club. And they don't have to say anything in the media. What does that scream like to you, Henry, in terms of their commitment long term? Because there's no doubt about it, there's been genuine interest around the football club, and we've had Martin Lipton on the show many times, a big Tottenham fan who again has had a number of reported people that have come to him saying they're looking to buy the club in this last 12-18 months, and again we've had Amanda Staley being linked. I mean, what do you think personally the future looks like for Tottenham under the Lewis family? Can you see them really being here long term? Because it doesn't appear they want to be here long term. And again, I go back to that point around the directors and ownership test, the fact they're not on that matter itself, does that give you an indication they're not keen?
Well, they should be, and that's one of the reasons why the regulator is coming in, because there will be an element of that. They announced it a couple of months ago, and it is an increased, slightly more sort of finessed, but a more searching owners and directors test, which actually, in fairness, the Premier League has enhanced theirs. I know Amanda Staveley, I think she'd be exactly what you need in terms of an individual who, Newcastle still miss her, because she was the sort of the glue, she was the conduit. She got on with Eddie Howe. Without going into another club's issues, people like her are absolute gold dust. Because she's a brilliant deal maker. She can nail a deal. If you wanted a player, she would go out and sort that deal, like David Gill did at Manchester United, that David Dean did, if I'm allowed to mention him, at Arsenal. These people are really, really important. So you have the technical director and the scouting department who see someone. You still need someone who can close the deal. She's brilliant at that, and she just gets on with people. And whoever it is, whether it's the steward on the gate, who's checking your accreditation when you're going at the training ground, to the superstar striker, she's really good with people. And I think you've missed that sort of fluidity of a character who works between all departments and unites everyone together, who's like very good in COVID, so just sending emails. Is everyone okay? That's like Susan Whelan was at Leicester City. You're missing a bit of that touch, that sort of humanity, that galvanizing or unifying individual. I don't know what the state of her sort of bidding for a club. I know she has been interested in getting back into a club, and she lives in London, so that would kind of make sense. But you are an attractive proposition. I mean, if you were up for sale, there'll be a lot of people wanting or be interested in you if they can afford it, because you're not going to come cheap, even if you do slip down a division. And really, again, it comes back to the players. It's the players who will, confirm your status in the Premier League. Do that and then sort out all your boardroom issues. But at the moment, you need people in the boardroom going into the dressing room saying, come on, we are all in this together. We're going to have a proper chat, sort out your future, sort out the club's future in the summer. But for now, we are in the trenches and we've got to fight. I mean, it might sound sort of...
Can you see them doing that, Henry, just in your experience?
I don't think you've got enough leaders. I certainly know one manager who was linked with your club, careful what I say, who didn't think you had enough fighters, put it that way.
And I think obviously we had a really interesting season. It feels like we've been through everything this season, but when Daniel Levy left, which feels like years ago, but it was actually still this season, we were kind of promised this new era for the Lewis family. Some people will label it as ENIC 2.0. I think they've tried to almost have a PR drive to stop calling it ENIC anymore because of the previous connotations that they have. But they were promised an ambitious new football club, and they promised they were going to put the football club first. I think, obviously, in the January transfer window has been a bit of a disappointment, and on the pitch has been an absolute disaster. Do you think there's any possibility that they might have realised now that they've maybe bitten off more than they can chew, and they might look to sell in summer just because of how much of a disaster that's been since they took over the ENIC 2.0, the new version?
Well, I hope they're listening to this. I hope they're listening to intelligent fans like you two who care. I didn't enjoy that. That footage when I think was it Vivian Lewis. There was a fan who was obviously wanting to have a chat with her, but you should do it in a certain way. And if you want answers out of someone, don't necessarily shout. I mean, the video might not have told the whole story, but I was thinking, come on. But I thought actually
similar on Thursday as well. Apparently, there's a lot of angry fans directing anger towards the board members in the stadium. Yeah, on Thursday as well.
Yeah, I know. I mean, look, I can understand the anger, but it's how you express it, and also if you go too far, then that they might retrench as well. So, it's absolutely a balance. But she's got to listen. Is it her son-in-law? So I haven't got the Lewis family tree to hand.
You're asking yourself is what we're saying even on here, or again what they're hearing in the stadium, is this kind of resonating? Thinking like you said there, Bill. I wonder, are they sitting there thinking we've been successful in a lot of other businesses, but we can't get a grasp on this? And I think that's kind of what it feels like. Fans on the outside looking in, we're looking at thinking. Well, everything about Daniel Levy, right? I said this before about Daniel Levy, that, look, I'm glad that he's left the football club. I wouldn't be begging for Daniel to come back. But what it did feel for them is that Daniel did give them a degree of assurity about the way the club was being run. I mean, you'd laugh and joke and said, under Levy, you were never going to be relegated, but you also weren't ever going to win the Premier League. He steps aside now, and here we are, and there's every chance Tottenham could be relegated. I'm not looking for Levy to come back. I wouldn't want Daniel to come back, but I think Daniel stepping away and really, like you say, I think this is really key as well. Vinay, to me, looks like a number 2, not a number 1. So it looks like at the moment, you've got a boardroom there full of real, from the outside looking in, my opinion alone, a lot of indecisive people that don't quite know what to do. And when you've got a lot of these people that are functioning in and around the football club, where you need, like you said earlier, Henry, football people, my worry is this is where it can go wrong. And you've seen this before with big football clubs, the likes of Aston Villa, Newcastle, they've been relegated. My fear is, like Billy said earlier about the January transfer window, they didn't want to panic, but by not panicking, what they've done now is they've put themselves in a situation where the form guide, the momentum, everything is pointing towards this club getting relegated. Everything.
I mean, the thing about the transfer window is that your physio's room wasn't exactly empty then. I mean, it was pretty clear that you needed individuals. I think you're right. But these are intelligent people. You don't get to the top in other industries. They must be aware. They must be listening to you. They must see that this is a crisis of leadership. It's not as if the stadium is falling down. If you've got issues with a stadium that probably a quarter to a third of the Premier League have, it's not as if you've got issues with a training ground. Levy's legacy is in all those. But one of the things about Daniel Levy that I'm very aware of is that he was involved in everything throughout the club. His hand was, his influence was everywhere, even in what you might call tiny little things that he would want to be absolutely sort of perfect, and he would have some oversight over. And so replacing that all sort of pervading force is probably more than one individual can do. So maybe there is an element of a vacuum with him leaving and people working out, how you drive it forward. But you do need a leader. You need one on the pitch. You need one in the dugout. You need one in, you absolutely need one in the boardroom. And I look around that boardroom and I agree with you on Vinay. I mean, he's, I quite like chief executives and chairmen who are sort of rude to me or ignore me, because I think that, but he's very engaging. He's very personal. He's obviously very bright, like Levy,
so
Cambridge
how surprised
graduate.
are you then on that point, Henry? How surprised have you been? I know Bill was itching to come and he'll come straight after this. How surprised have you been about maybe the lack of communication recently? Because it feels like it's all very well coming out when things are okay, but when things are where they are now, this is when you want to hear from people. Or is that unrealistic to think that, Henry?
No, I mean, I think Bill's point about sort of being a number two, I think he is. It's now, whether he's a natural number two, it's now you have to show that you're a number one. He was very good in COVID. Some of the things he did, maybe that was the slightly sort of, it suited him a bit more, but there was real leadership. He showed them really important leadership in the community and the club. Back at Arsenal, obviously. And he needs to show that now, and he needs to be strong. But, I'm not in the boardroom. I don't know whether he's been given license by Joe and the Lewis family to be the leader of the club. But one thing, and Bill referenced it, the statement they made when they, when Levy left, and I'm sure he was very surprised to leave, was that actually sounded quite good. I thought, maybe they're all right. You're going to give them a chance, because they actually sounded like they were going to get a grip. They were going to invest some money. There was going to be new energy, new investment, a bit more, youth. Obviously, a lot younger than Joe. So yeah, but I have to say I like Vinay, but I'm disappointed that he's not been on the front foot more, because he will know the issues. He'll know what you said. He'll have heard you on Sky, and he must have been nodding in agreement with the majority of what you said, and 100% in how much you care and how this great club needs more care, more people who care.
And we've touched on it all night, and I just wanted to, you feel perfectly placed to answer this question, just with your experience of covering the Premier League and, the boardrooms as well. I just wondered if, the disastrous did happen and Tottenham did get relegated, how big a story, would that send shockwaves through the entire football world, do you think?
Tottenham Hotspur going down?
And what would the repercussions be for Tottenham? Would it be recoverable, or would it just be, just from your experience?
It's recoverable.
How big would it be if Tottenham went down?
Huge. If Tottenham Hotspur, founding member of the Premier League, Tottenham Hotspur with, I would say, the best stadium, well, the new Bernabeu, but the top two stadiums, the club of Harry Kane, of Modric, of Son, I can go back through Pavlyuchenko, Bale. Sorry, I'm so dancing on your grave here by mentioning all these.
So many
Gaza,
Waddle,
Hoddle. Perryman.
Lineker.
Lineker. That's absolute madness.
Berbatov. What a player he was.
Berbatov, what players? But you know what? I hope the players understand that it's a very real threat, and you need dogs of war. And even if these players don't necessarily have that in them naturally, they're going to have to find it. They're going to have to actually look at each other. And it was quite good to hear that, as you mentioned, that they had that meeting the other day, and they may look at Igor Tudor and think, actually, we're going to have to do this ourselves. And I've seen teams do that before, but it's absolutely down to them. But Tottenham Hotspur getting relegated will be, I don't know. It's been an extraordinary season, but it will be, one of the biggest stories for years.
Do you think Emery personally then get out of this?
It's down to the players. It's that absolutely down to the players. Look at those fixtures. They've got to fight. Yeah. You've still got some good players. If Tudor can actually put them in the right order, and I take your point about them. Look, that Forest game, it sort of absolutely leaks out.
Massive.
But Gibbs White will be up for that.
Can you imagine?
And and Elliot Anderson, who probably had a little bit of a dip, and maybe all the England hype got to him. But he's a player I've been watching since he was on loan at Bristol Rovers, and he's absolutely the real deal. He will be up for it. You know, you've got no one of his substance, even
and
when
they
all
beat us
your
3-0
players
not long ago. They beat us 3-0.
Yeah, it's 3-0 not long ago under Frank. And again, it goes back to that point with Frank earlier. I know, Henry, you've already referenced with Frank, that I know there's a lot of people outside of Tottenham that were looking at Frank thinking, even with that, they thought it was too early. But I think we saw this, Bill, bless you, we saw this months ago with Thomas, that he was held on to too long. And actually, what will be the damage for Tottenham is not getting rid of Thomas Frank earlier and allowing it to play out the way they did, to the point where we even had suggestions that Vinay and Johan Lange actually wanted to keep him longer. And the fact they brought in Johnny Heitinger, just 30 days or so before he was let go, shows you they still wanted it to work, despite every Spurs fan seeing this is not working. But I suppose just on that point, because I'm very conscious of time, if it doesn't work under Tudor, Henry, in terms of where we are right now, because I think my gut feeling is they'll probably let him have the Atletico Madrid, maybe the Liverpool game, and the following Atletico Madrid game. But on the basis, it might sound really, really bad, that I think you could quite comfortably see Spurs losing the next three, and therefore giving the job to somebody else to come in on the back of those three games right now. You could conceivably lose them all. So then anyone new coming in right now could have 3 defeats before they even start. And it feels, like you mentioned there, that Forest game on the 22nd of March, that feels like a final. That will feel one of the final opportunities for Tottenham to pull themselves clear. So what's your gauge on that, Henry, for you, in terms of, can you understand why they maybe have not made the change for Tudor now? Because they're looking at his fixtures thinking, the 2 Madrid games are tough anyway. Liverpool away is never a happy hunting ground for Tottenham. You go back to Harry Redknapp, the last man to win there as the Spurs manager. Is that maybe why they're not making that decision right now?
I think the fact that there's a looming international break after the Forest game,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a classic time where managers who are on shifting sands get most nervous. But that Nottingham Forest game could define your season.
Agree.
Because it's more than a 6-pointer, so my maths is terrible. But that is absolutely huge game, that. So they're going to have to take a gamble. But the one thing, they will be looking at this. I don't believe that they're sitting around just sort of chatting and playing bridge in the boardroom. Are
you sure they're not? Because it probably feels like they do.
Well, honestly, 5 seconds, let alone 5 minutes of you on Sky Sports, which they will have had playing on in the background, excuse me, will have made them very aware of it. And I just hope, I keep coming back to the players, but that's what it's down to now. Because
you think it's more down to them now than any other change, not a Harry, not a Robbie Keane. You think the only way now we're going to get out of this is the players. There's no one that can give them a lift. I wonder, what is your take on that with Harry? You mentioned Harry there, maybe coming in with Jermaine. I don't know. You've seen Tim Sherwood being linked with a job. You've even gone back to see Ryan Mason. Then Hoddle's thrown his name in his last 24 hours. Can you see any plausible option that comes in that's maybe a Tottenham man that wants to save them? Can you see that in any way? You've been around football for so many years. How surprised would you be to see them change now to give a last opportunity to someone? I mean, Marinakis done it 4 times, hasn't he, this season? 3 times this season?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see them make a change, certainly in the international window. I couldn't tell you who they would go for. And that was similar when they came up with Igor Tudor, because I don't think there were many obvious candidates then. I mean, we had Sean Dyche on the, on our podcast the other day, but does he want to go back in? I mean, he would certainly sort out that defence. And I mean, Harry Redknapp's got Cheltenham. I mean, I know Tottenham Hotspur is even more important than Cheltenham, but we had his trainer Ben Pauling on the radio program that I do this morning, and he was talking about one of the favourites is, I think it's Jukebox Man, which is one of Harry's. Of course, you had to have a picture of him on his phone. I mean, he could well have been calling the club. It could have been, Nico, I'm getting the team back together. All that
Crouchy and Jermaine back together.
Yeah, get Crouchy. Look, I take your point, and because I know and like Michael Carrick, I really get the DNA argument. I just don't think it's sentimental, as some people would say. I do think it's important you have someone who has some empathy and experience of the club, particularly if they're having to come in and have a quick turnaround. I really like Robbie Keane, but again, he's involved in Europe. He's doing well with Ferencváros, so that might be one for to visit later. But I just think that you're having an element of someone who understands the club, because look, I was wrong on Thomas Frank. I actually thought he would come in and do well, but he just didn't pick up what the club is about. And that is, the game is about glory. To dare is to do. For some people, they're cliches, but actually they are woven into your love of Tottenham Hotspur and why you support them, because it's a style as well as the substance of winning.
I know people worry about Glenn's health as well, taking the job. Go on, Bill.
Yeah.
Worry about any manager's health that's taken on us at the moment. But,
I agree.
I know it sounds ridiculous to focus on the future at the moment, as when the short term is so in crisis mode. But obviously beyond the summer, beyond the interim, the two names that keep coming up are Roberto De Zerbi and Mauricio Pochettino. And I'm sure anyone that has a passing eye on Tottenham Hotspur will know that there is still this sort of obsession with Pochettino. It seems to go both ways as well. He seems to mention us in interviews just as much as we do with him. But just looking at the long term, I know that sounds ridiculous at the moment because we don't even know what league we're going to be in. But do you think it's probably going to be likely out of those two managers to the ones that are going to get the permanent job in the summer?
Well, I think it would only be one then, and that would be Pochettino if you can. And we've discussed the sort of the sensitivity and the difficulties of how any approach, if it were to be made, how it would be made, and more specifically the timing of it, given the US men's national team's involvement in a rather big competition this summer. De Zerbi, I like him.
That's going to end in. That's going to end in. That's a right. Listen, that for a writer is an unbelievable story. But as a Tottenham fan, that's going to end in tears. That's a fire.
It's brilliant. It's like opening your laptop and then pulling a pin out of a grenade. I mean, it is, it's fun. But it's probably doesn't do much for the computer. Would a board want someone who is as challenging as him? I mean, it would be
Tony Bloom's from a mile off, didn't he, Henry? And
yeah. I mean, it would be, it would be a very nice summer fling, but maybe not a wedding.
Listen, I think, should we close on a point? Because what's mad is Billy was asking you about us getting relegated, and the look on your face, you were trying to process it, but we've obviously been sleepwalking into this for months upon months upon months. And like I've said, it's given me now some sleepless nights generally. Gut feeling, Henry, the Spurs staying up with Tudor in charge. Because I have to be, so I say it again, I don't want to, keep raining on the man generally, but I don't see a world in which Tottenham stay up if Igor Tudor is the manager. And that might be absolutely brutal to come to that conclusion after 3 games, 3 different formations, absolutely torn the players after the second game. But I just can't see a world in which he's going to get anything out of these players. And we've got 3 tough games in terms of the Atletico Madrid's back-to-back and the Liverpool game before you come to Forest where, that could be 7 or 8, 9 defeats on the bounce where he's got to try and get the players back up.
But don't you think it would be very typical of your players, and also at the same time an indictment of them and their character, if they get up for the Atletico Madrid game and not for the relegation fight? And you could argue the relegation fight is obviously more significant in terms of your long-term future, although I hate the idea of Tottenham fielding a weakened team in the Champions League. That is not, I know there was all that debate, was it last year or the year before, with the sort of Manchester City going for the title, and you didn't want the team because you wanted to scupper Arsenal. You got to be above that, and I think you are. But yeah, I'd completely take your point about Igor Tudor being out of his depth, but it's just the players. I know I've just said that throughout, but it really is about the players. It is about the pride. It's about, you guys work and you have a pride in your own work, whatever you might think of your boss. Just go out and deliver, because these players, they owe it to you. And I hope some of them listen to this, watch this, absorb it, listen to you on, I almost felt like when you're up and giving you counselling, Ricky, having also watch you on. You
are right now.
Well, yeah.
You have been a counsellor for us tonight. An outside, sometimes it's an outside voice in amongst us as Spurs fans, me and Bill. It's nice to have a refreshing outside voice. But the great thing about it, Henry, is I think what you've seen on this show is just how a lot of Spurs fans are feeling. And it's great to have an outside voice with someone of you, and I hope your mum is saying, someone of a massive, massive scale of following in terms of what you've done in your own journalist career and what you've covered and how you've covered and the stories you've covered. Like you said, I mean, the look on your face for listeners on audio, when Billy asked Henry what would happen if Spurs got relegated, you looked absolutely stunned. But the fear, if you speak to a lot of match-going Tottenham fans, genuinely, Henry, everyone I speak to that I come into contact with tells me we're going down. And the only way we won't be going down is if we make some kind of a monumental change in that managerial dugout that lifts the mood. And I agree, it is about the players, but the players look on the floor so bereft of confidence. So bereft of confidence.
Yeah, but I've seen teams win titles when there wasn't necessarily huge support for the manager, should we put it like that? I mean, I think that you've got enough talent in that dressing room to say, right, well, actually, if we want to be getting bigger clubs, because you are a big club in the summer, we are thinking of moving on. Let's make sure our resume looks good, doesn't have a relegation on it. The recent footage is of us absolutely fighting for this team, getting you out of a hole, and then they will get the sort of the moves if they want to move. I don't know their individual details, but I agree with you on Tudor. He is out of his depth, but now it's all about the depth of passion and belief and determination of the players.
Amen. Bill, close to you, and we'll get Henry to once again tell our wonderful audience where they can find his amazing podcast. Bill, what do you think, gauge for you? Next few days, Atletico Madrid. What's your view? Like Henry said there, that he wouldn't be comfortable with seeing us field a weakened team. What's your view and how we manage that, Bill?
Obviously, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Van de Ven is suspended for the next Premier League game, so I'm sure that he will play. And Romero, it's his first game back as well. So those two are going to play together for probably the first time.
I know we're really conscious of time. I'm going to ask you a very quick question. I'd love if Henry's got a viewpoint on this as well. Van de Ven and Romero, two of the most, like we said earlier, important players for Spurs this season. In the fact that these two have, let's be honest about it, Van de Ven has massively let us down by getting that sending off. He's only going to miss the one game against Liverpool. But Romero, even when he comes back, he could face a further ban. How much, Bill, would that tarnish their relationship with Spurs fans down the line if, look, they were heroic in what they did in Bilbao less than 12 months ago. But if these two players end up being part of a group that sees Spurs getting relegated, Bill, what does that do to their legacy, in your opinion?
I think it goes for any of the players other than, at the moment, if the only one that would sort of come out surviving at the moment would be Archie Gray, wouldn't it? I think if you want that on your CV of being part of the group that relegated Tottenham, at least being the captain that relegated Tottenham, it's my worry is, Rick, my big worry about it all is, how much do the players really care about that? Because, they'll probably get a move in the summer. And I kind of feel like it's the fans that are the ones that have to suffer for that, because we're going to be in the Championship next season. We're going to have to go through the pain of it. A lot of those players might be checked out and think, well, I won't be here next year anyway. I hope not. But for me, I just think that would be a permanent stain on their legacy against Tottenham if you are part of the group that's... And I think Henry is right at the moment. I don't think it matters massively who our manager is now. It's going to come down to those 11 players on the pitch. And we haven't really seen enough fight from any of them other than maybe Archie Gray. Richarlison, we know, has done it before, and he is always one that went into fight. But I'm just really, really worried that at the moment, some of these players haven't really got the gravity of the situation, and I'm maybe worrying too much about what's going to happen next year, and maybe thinking, well, even if Tottenham get relegated, I'll be off. I'll get my move to La Liga. I don't care, and it's us fans that are going to be the one that have to sit with it. I really hope not, and I really hope we look back on the season as a near miss rather than a relegation. But the thing that I keep thinking of is that it's not the players that have to live with this for the rest of their life; it's the fans, and that's my biggest worry.
Yeah, honestly. Henry, I've got to say, thank you ever so much for your time. I mean, it sounds mad. We've spoken for an hour and a half, but you won't believe this, or you may believe this. I thought I've only just scratched the surface. We could do, God, how many more hours on Tottenham, but it would mentally, I think, kill us all. Henry, you've been a star. Where can we find the wonderful podcast you are at the moment co-hosting of? There's over 15,500 that are watching this show live. Let them know where they can find you, and obviously TalkSport as well. Where can we find the wonderful work you do for the Spurs, the football community, as well as Spurs community?
Yeah, I mean, assorted magazines, but just the Football Boardroom, which we just started up, and it's Gareth Southgate's new venture. So we had him on. We thought we'd better have the gaffer on So we've interviewed him, we've interviewed Sean Dyche, but it's mainly the two of us talking, or me trying to understand the sort of the financial world and the sort of the significance, and also the characters, because he obviously he knows Daniel Levy very well. So we've had debates about Tottenham Hotspur and Thomas Frank. When Thomas left, we had an emergency pod on that. So look, I think I was the only person in the country who didn't have a podcast, so it made sense that I got one. But thanks very much for having me on, because it's, what you are doing and what you are discussing, and the passion of your fans and supporters of Tottenham Hotspur who are listening in. If the players listen to this and they show a tenth of your passion and desire, then you've got a chance. But as you say, you are in a dogfight.
And let's hope we can get out of it, because I tell you what, it's frightening when you see the Lincoln fans already, Bill, over the weekend.
Yeah, Stevenage and Lincoln, both of them, yeah.
This is my biggest concern. If we go down, I'm not sure we're going to come back up straight away, which is a frightening prospect, but Emery will be up. We'll be all right?
Yeah. Down to the players now. Simple as that.
Listen, down to the players. Players, show up. Do everything for us. I want to say a massive thank you to the superb Billie T. Bill, thank you ever so much for probably one of the most enjoyable shows that I've done on Last One Spurs in under real perverse circumstances, speaking with an absolute wonderful journalist in Henry Winter. Henry, thank you. Please make sure you go out and check out that wonderful podcast. Henry, thank you. Bill, thank you. Thank you to the over 12,500 that have been with us. We have been the Last One on Spurs. Please keep safe, keep well. As the boys have said, players, it's all on you. Take care. And as always, come on you Spurs.